Tonight on Unity News.
I could just call like a baby.
Oh, wow. The season of miracles continues. With the Chase McDonnough story.
The mortality rate is really high. There's a really good likelihood that he's not going to make it.
And Father prayed with us and prayed over Chase. And literally, as you read some of those stories in the Bible, you could start to literally see them go away.
Doctors and nurses were being called back to see his progression.
They're coming in really to witness what turned out to be a miracle.
You're an inspiration. You will always have an impact on Pocahontas.
Tonight on Unity News.
Hello, I'm Danny Ellis.
Hi, I'm Angie Capps.
And our May episode of Season of Miracles starts right now.
Here we go.
And we're back. We have a lot of stuff going on. We got a busy show tonight. Angie, what's going on with the youth?
Actually, we just got back from state convention.
Okay.
State con. We had we took down 3 boys and 4 girls, and Jill Nichols and Josh were our chaperones, and they done a great job.
Okay.
We did actually did 2.5 hours of a adoration that was absolutely amazing. We had 12 priests down there for reconciliation.
Wow.
And you would not believe the line that those kids were going to confession. It was amazing.
So the youth are on fire.
Youth are on fire.
So many things are happening.
Yes.
You know, and we've mentioned, we had a couple of shows ago, we talked about Asbury and then the possible miracle going on, and with the hosts that were just magically appearing. And nothing would surprise me. The Lord's at work. It's a dark time on the planet right now. We've got Ukraine going on. We got all the division in the country, and so many things are going on that are just affecting. It's just a dark feeling.
Yes.
But God's timing is
It was
perfect.
shining in Little Rock, though.
Oh, yeah.
Other than tornadoes.
We
were there the weekend the tornadoes hit.
The tornado hit y'all? No.
No, we had to go down in the basement of the Doubletree twice.
Well, that's wisdom. That's wisdom.
It actually hit 5 miles from where we were.
Yeah. That was tough over
But
there.
it was tough.
Yeah,
Some of the kids that were there actually with us downstairs, their parents were at home and they had no idea what was going on at their house. So
yeah, it's awful. It's tough.
It was.
It's really, we need to keep them in our prayers.
Absolutely.
West Little Rock and Wynn, and of course it's that time of the year, the spring season. But so many things are going on. But getting you kind of prepared for tonight's show, take a look at this.
Within the span of a few weeks' time, the McDonnough family of Pocahontas watched their normally healthy, active teen Chase get progressively more sick and eventually comatose.
2 years ago today, they didn't think that he would make it through the day, but they credit a great medical team and a whole lot of prayer to get him back to where he is today.
Ready, defense!
As with almost anything in life, the best offense is a good defense. For Chase McDonnough, it's something that's drilled into him every single basketball practice.
Turn it. Good. Let's go.
For his parents,
We have 4 kids. We've seen plenty of things.
That same mantra was the driving force behind keeping their children healthy and feeling well.
Kids had a fever, I'll give them some ibuprofen.
Until what was the norm turned their lives upside down.
I had a lot of guilt for a long time because I've told many people ibuprofen was my go-to.
It all started 2 years ago.
Chase had always been a very active, energetic, go, 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 like a typical teenager.
But for weeks, he was lethargic, just not himself.
You know, it really started very subtly.
For a week straight, Chase was in and out of the clinic, tested for strep throat, mono, and the flu, but with no positive results. By the time Friday rolled around, he developed blisters on his mouth and on his eyes and was hospitalized.
The whites of his eyes, there was no white. They were completely red and blistered.
Meanwhile, his skin had started to blister too. He was reaching fevers of 105 degrees. During an x-ray, doctors discovered he also had pneumonia in one of his lungs, but couldn't explain why his body was reacting in such a way.
Of course, to get his fever down, they were giving him ibuprofen.
It was a move that nearly killed him.
Chase was progressively getting worse at a very quick rate.
By Saturday, the decision was made to transport Chase to Arkansas Children's Hospital, and it's lucky they did.
That's really how we met, unfortunately.
Within minutes of entering ACH, Dr. Jake Lee saw Chase for the first time and immediately diagnosed him with Stevens-Johnson syndrome, what he calls a rare overreaction of the immune system, something that family and doctors had unknowingly been fueling for weeks.
He had pneumonia, his immune system got down, and the ibuprofen triggered it.
Motrin is one of the more common causes. It's not the most common. I wish I could say there was a way to prevent it, but there's simply not.
There's also no way to cure it. Worst of all, what Chase was presenting outwardly,
it's basically a second-degree burn,
was also happening to his mucosal membrane.
the airway, the mouth, the lips, his tongue, the eyes.
To save his life, Chase was intubated and placed in a chemical coma.
We were being told we're just trying to keep him alive.
Unable to give Chase certain medications, Dr. Lee and the rest of the primary care team had to get creative with treatment.
It's basically they pull a bunch of immunoglobulins from human donors and then they give it to a patient. It actually blocks what the immune system is doing to the body.
Between the immunoglobulins, more commonly known as IVIG, and prayers from people across Region 8, the McDonoughs were simply waiting for Chase to get better. On a daily basis, he was given a 50-50 chance to live until Monday, February 11th, when things took a turn for the worst.
You know, the doctor said, you know, I'm sorry, we're going to do the best we can, but, you know, we give him maybe a 2 to 5% chance to live through the day.
But then something strange started to happen.
They had all done morning rounds and saw how dire the circumstance was.
The new blisters that were forming were just as quickly going away.
So you had to take pictures to prove, like, am I seeing this right?
Doctors and nurses were being called back to see his progression.
They're coming in really to witness what turned out to be a miracle.
And after weeks of only knowing him as comatose and covered in bandages and blisters, one of the people most happy to see Chase make this comeback was Dr. Lee.
His parents brought him back. It was pretty amazing. And they said, Chase, this is Dr. Lee. This is the man that saved your life. And you'll never forget something like that.
Now, being from Pocahontas, I watched Chase's progress pretty closely, and one of my favorite photos to see was Chase post-coma on the roof of Arkansas Children's Hospital shooting hoops again, but he was still a long way back from being back to normal. During his time in the hospital, he lost 15% of his body weight. But check him out now. He's back to playing basketball and many other sports for the Pocahontas Junior High Redskins, though it did take a lot of hard work and dedication over the past 2 years. You'd have to really look closely to see anything was wrong with Chase. The only lasting difference is due to the scar tissue that's built up in his lungs.
Okay, guys, we're back. Here we go. I would like to introduce you to our special guest, Andrew McDonough and Jenna, and they are going to give us a little...
This thing is so big.
I don't even know what to say.
And of course, we all, you know, if you're from Pocahontas, of course, we have a lot of viewers in Pulaski County, Craighead County. If you lived in Randolph County just a few years ago, you knew all about what was going on.
2014?
2014.
Yeah.
And this is a really amazing story, as you saw on the news report that we just aired a few minutes ago. And McDonough family has graciously agreed to come on the show, and we're so thankful that you're here because you guys have got a story to tell.
Well, thank you for having us.
And, you know, and we just appreciate it. And I guess Chase is in college now.
Yes, he's senior in college.
Senior in college. Boy, time gets away from us. What's his major, if you don't mind me asking?
He graduates May 6th from A State with a business admin degree with a minor in accounting.
Awesome. Now, where's he going? A-State?
Yep.
I thought he was in Conway.
He was his freshman year.
Oh, okay. And then he had actually a relapse.
He did. And so I wanted to be closer to home.
Okay, let's get back to the beginning, though.
Well, we're on now, so yeah, we're this is part of it.
Yeah.
These are good. These are
all. This is all good stuff.
Yeah.
This is all good stuff. Yeah, I can start it out.
Where is that?
Start it out.
Okay.
You know, I think as you saw from the story, this all happened and started in January of 2014. And Chase was a very young man then, and again was healthy for the most part and his entire life, and started feeling extremely fatigued in January, almost like a flu-like symptom. He still pushed through, was still playing basketball.
Going to school.
Going to school, doing all of that. And then the last week of January really started to just show some signs that we weren't familiar with. We thought maybe he had strep throat or...
Did y'all think at one time I might be mono also?
They tested him for mono.
Locally, here at the clinics here.
Yeah, so we started going to the clinics here that last week of January, and saw some wonderful people, and you know, they didn't particularly know what was going on with Chase, had never seen it before. And by the end of that week, that Friday, coming into the end of January, Chase was admitted to the hospital here in Pocahontas. And Doc Baltzett actually was the final doctor that we saw before he said, listen, you need to get him in the hospital, see what's going on. And then we stayed there for about a day and a half, at which point he progressively was getting a lot worse, and they couldn't really tell us what was going on. You know, the doctor there, who was kind of a hospitalist that traveled, had seen a lot, but hadn't seen anything like what Chase was displaying. And it just started getting really scary for us. I think that Friday night, you know, Jen and I talked and said that if he wasn't better by the next morning, we were going to request a transfer to Arkansas Children's. And so I went home to prepare, and of course we had 3 other kids that were in school at the time too, and young, and let them know kind of what was going on. And then that evening, you know, Chase was really scared, and actually said to his mom that, you know, he didn't want to die.
He said, am I dying?
Right.
I feel like I'm dying.
Right. And so I think,
now,
you know,
at this point, were the blisters on him?
Yes, they were starting to develop.
They were starting
there.
to develop.
Yep, they were starting to develop really in his mouth. And, yep.
Some on his body, and by the next morning, they really progressed.
Right.
I knew it, but it happened fast.
It happened really fast.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we went, you know, I think the miracles really started there. And it was, you know, I was talking to that doctor, who was a traveling doctor, and we had talked about spirituality and books, and, you know, talked to me about a book that I should read, and that he had children of his own. And, you know, I went the next morning and I said, you know, I think that we'd feel more comfortable if we could transfer out. And he was hesitant. And, you know, he just said, you know, I think we're getting somewhere, you know, I'm not sure about it yet, but, you know, I'd like to kind of hold on. And, you know, I just brought it back to his own daughter, because he had talked about his daughter.
Sure.
And I said, listen, if this were you and this was happening to your child, would you want to go someplace where there's all kinds of experts? And he agreed. And so we waited. That was a long day. That day, it took them a long time. At this point, they were thinking that they had to transfer him to Arkansas Children's in the ward that he was contagious.
Yeah,
so they were thinking actually that he had
still
chicken
didn't know.
pox.
They didn't
or
know what it was.
Some type of chicken pox or something that
Something
was
new.
yes,
Very
very rare.
Which turned out was, but
very rare,
Yeah.
right?
And at this point, Chase couldn't even open his eyes. They had completely blistered shut. And when they would open them, like there was no whites left to his eyes. They were completely red, and blistered.
So we finally, the ambulance came, and of course only one of us could go. And as any parent knows, it was just really difficult because we were very anxious. And so Jen rode down in the ambulance with Chase, and I followed. And we got to Arkansas Children's fairly late that Saturday evening. And Chase was really in distress at that point. So they brought him up to 4th floor, got checked into the regular ward. And we weren't in there very long before they called in what they call their emergency medic team. And at any time that you're in Arkansas Children's, if you feel the need for an entire group to evac to your room, all you have to do is call this number. Well, one of the nurses did anyways, and the team came up, and Dr. Jake was leading that team. He had been
our first miracle.
Yeah. He had,
I know.
Yeah.
Do you want to get him some water?
Yeah, I want some water.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Todd, you care? You want some water?
Jenna.
Sure, I'll take
Okay, we're going to stop for a second.
So, and again, so they called for the evac team, and a young doctor. I guess he wasn't that young, but he's
younger than us.
Had been a pediatrician for 14 years in the Air Force, and was heading up this team. And he was the first to tell us that he thought that Chase had Stephen Johnson. And right at that point, Chase went into respiratory distress. And so they asked us if they could intubate him, where they breathe for him. Because basically at this point, he wasn't able to do that.
You both were just like, what is happening here?
I mean, I think it was such mixed feelings. One, we were happy to be someplace where they finally said something, right, properly diagnosed them, where you felt very comfortable and confident. And yet the other side of it was that
he's telling you, don't Google it. Don't look it up.
Well, I was going to ask you, after this point, had you heard of Stevens Johnson?
I think, it was weird because earlier in that day, I went to high school with a girl that was now an emergency nurse. And she was asking me about the blisters and things like that. And she had actually that morning, when all of that was going on with the transfer, had said, hey, you need to look this up and maybe ask them if that's what this is.
What it is.
Because it could be. And listen, she had seen a lot as well. She was in a huge hospital in Kentucky. So she had seen a lot, but, wasn't in any way trying to diagnose or step in, was just saying, hey, it sounds like it's presenting like this. And so, maybe you should say something. But, Dr. Jake hit it on the head and told us what was about to happen, but also gave us really probably the scariest news.
You didn't have a lot of hope, did you? He didn't give a lot of hope, did he?
Well, he just said, there's no cure. We're going to put him in a coma, because, we can't have him struggling and trying to do that. So we're going to put him in a chemically induced coma. At this point,
what's on the outside is completely covering the inside. So basically, he was burning from the inside out.
Equivalent of 2nd-degree burns.
Yes, and it just
So yeah, it was
not good prognosis.
No,
at all.
not at all. So then, they moved us down to 2nd floor, which is obviously their highest unit of intensive care. You are in a room with a nurse who's in there full time, 24 hours a day. They have rotating nurses that sit in the room. You can't sleep, but they have a rocking chair and a little couch there. And then those rooms kind of open up to a bigger area where all the doctors and everything else, so that they can see each room. So it was extremely intimidating. And and it was very difficult to hear that there wasn't a lot that they could do, if anything, right?
So did they let both of y'all stay in there with them?
Yes, we could, if one of us at night would go to the Ronald McDonald House, because you
we
weren't
didn't
allowed
do that
to.
for about the
Yeah, you
first
weren't
11
allowed.
days.
Yeah, you weren't allowed to sleep in there.
Right.
So,
But you both actually got to go be in there with them.
oh yes, we
That's
didn't.
good.
We
So
didn't
we
leave.
stayed, right? So
we
we
did not
stayed,
leave.
even though they said,
Yeah.
you know, and the nurses were pretty good because
They were
would one of
understanding.
us sleep? Of course we would, right?
Absolutely.
So I mean, one would sit in the rocking chair,
Sit
and,
right next to him.
yeah, and sit next to him and hold his hand and talk to him, and you know, a lot of the nurses would say, you know, listen, he's not going to remember. He doesn't hear you. He's in a coma. And I think it was probably about 6 days in, 6 or 7. And I felt like Chase was trying to squeeze my hand and talk to me and come out, right? And Jen and I were both talking to him and just letting him know, reassuring him that we were there, that everyone was praying for him. I think it's probably the first time in my life that I felt prayers.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did every day was we would update on Facebook, and Jen would, because you know Jen had 600 friends, and you know I had 4, and you know, and she was
actually
the one
did
that,
better at the updating.
but you know, and we just wanted people to know, really, family and friends, just where we were at, and you know, it just really caught fire. Right, the message started to get out.
Well, I can tell you, the whole town of Pocahontas was praying for you,
and
right.
that it touched us so much.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like I said, the first time in my life that I ever really felt the power of prayer. People reaching out. Obviously, we couldn't answer all the messages.
Of course not with that many.
Yeah,
they're taking care of Chase.
So you're just trying to update once a day, maybe twice a day. Trying not to share the grisly and the gruesome, which some of it really was. I think there was a few friends of ours from Pocahontas, and obviously our family that had come down. That got to see him in person, and I think it's something that they'll never forget because they were just shocked at how bad it was. And yet they were like, wow, I didn't get the whole impact from just your updates. And, you know, part of that was,
we didn't want to sound negative. I wanted people to keep
Right.
praying.
Right.
I didn't want them to think there's no hope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, you know, that, like I said, that prayer from, gosh, not just Pocahontas, but all the surrounding areas, for so many people, you know, churches from all over and all denominations reached out, and people reached out, and, you know, Jen's friend requests, you know, all of a sudden 8,000 and 9,000 people are following the story, and, you know, from 600, and then they're sharing, and then they would share a post. And, you know, I think the people saw that, you know, we were trying to remain very positive in our faith, in the faith in God, and praying ourselves. You know, Jen and I would pray every day. We would ask Dr. Jake if he would pray with us as well. When they would come and they would give like an update every morning, you know, the parents could sit and listen or stand and listen. And, you know, I remember one morning, and one of the residents that was working, and we had posted pictures of Chase when he looked healthy and normal all over the room. And of course, people were sending things. He said, you know, male patient 14. And, you know, I said, you know, his name is Chase. And, you know, to bring some type of personal there.
Chase, he was your son.
And, and they started to do that. So then they would say, this is Chase. And they would talk about what was going on. And so they had followed the Mayo Clinic. At one point was the first to diagnose it, right?
Okay.
And that's why it's called Stephen Johnson. So it's the last names of the 2 doctors that discovered it.
Okay.
And so they had a plan, which was to try to keep the patient alive until their immune system quit fighting against itself and would naturally go away, and hope that they would live, right? And so there's about a 50% mortality rate, and we knew that, and they were very upfront about that. They were talking about how severe Chase's case was, that they didn't know exactly what to do, but had given him what's called an IVIG treatment. And basically, when people give blood, they can also like spin out or extract, their hemoglobin, then their immune fighting system, and they introduce that to Chase into his system. Now, there's obviously a big risk of doing that because you're introducing somebody else's cells and everything else, and so the body can reject it and can go in
on top of everything else that's going on.
And so, but I think it was about day 6 or day 7, and we had been fixing his hair and talking to him and letting him know we were there all the time. Neither one of us had left his side. Occasionally we would go down to second floor. There was like a family area, and you could take a shower and then change clothes and then come right back up. We just didn't want to leave him.
So he took a turn for the worse.
For sure.
And I think it was a 2 to 5% probability.
That was February 12th. Yes. So I remember.
Do you remember the date?
For sure. Absolutely.
So when did it go better? When was the turn for the best?
Well, the scary thing was that was after he had his IVIG treatments.
Yeah, several of them.
We thought
is that when he got worse?
3. We were told that if it was going to work, that they should stop. The progression should stop.
Right.
And he developed new lesions at his blood pressure.
Yeah,
fever.
just everything. Yeah, everything was really just taking a turn for the worse. And so, actually, we had reached out. A priest from Little Rock came, was going to do the anointing of the sick again the next morning, and then of course, hopefully, be there for whatever could happen and was going to happen. And so that night, really, when they left and said, it's not getting better, he has somewhere between a 2 and 5% chance to make it. And, he's developing these new lesions. Obviously it was difficult. We could still feel the prayers. I had went down to the chapel and was reading scripture. And really one of the scriptures that I was reading, and I still to this day, obviously there was divine intervention, but it was really about when Christ was on the cross, and obviously there's 2 gentlemen next to him, and the one rejected him and the other said, I'm a sinner. And I just said to God that night, I said, listen, I don't deserve anything, and I'm a sinner, but if there's anything that you could do for our son, then let that happen. And so the next morning, of course, the priest came in and he saw those new lesions developing, and you literally could watch his arm and see them develop, right? And so we knew things were just not going well. And Father prayed with us and prayed over Chase. And literally, as you read some of those stories in the Bible, you could start to literally see them go away. The ones that just developed went back into his skin and literally went away. They started to clear up to the point where the 24-hour nurse or the nurses that are in there can't believe it, right? We're excited and happy, right? We're witnessing this.
You're witnessing this happening,
right? We're witnessing
and I think you
it.
had mentioned on another interview that you were having to get your phone and take. Is this really happening?
Absolutely. You had to take pictures to say, did I see that? I know I took a photo of that this morning because they were new. I know I did because we were scared and letting people know, letting our family know. We had to let our family.
And you had all the prayers going on. The gym at St. Paul's was full. All the different churches were praying. You could feel the prayer.
Yes.
Do you remember the priest's name that came and prayed on his name?
Father Mark, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Father Mark Woods.
Yes.
Mark Woods. Okay.
Yes.
I believe it was. And he was actually there when they took the tube out. when they took him off the
So
ventilator.
It progressed so quickly, the miracle did,
The healing
right?
was
The
coming.
healing did, that they had told us that because Chase had been in the coma for 13 days, 12, 13 days, that his rehab, even to talk, because of the tube, would be, a week, maybe longer. That he would be in a step down unit for, 4 to 5 to 6 weeks. And so we were expecting a very long recovery because that's typically what happened. And throughout the morning, doctors kept coming in, doctors we had never seen before. Of course, they were, understandably, they were getting something to come in. Dr. Jake, who was with us every day for that entire time we were there, and we asked him to pray with us. And I'm going to say before this happened that he will readily admit, but he wasn't much of a godly man. I don't think he believed in it. I think he was more of an atheist. After his experience with Chase, he gave up his residency there and joined a mission and was saved. And then wanted to travel with his family, his young family, and his wife to help children around the world. Because he gave 100% credit.
That's how remarkable that God is.
When he saw it, because he said, "This is not scientifically explainable. This is not scientifically explainable." Because he because he wanted everything to be a root of science, right? And I understand that, right? And it didn't make sense. But like Jen said, Father Mark was there. Chase was doing so well that they wanted to take the tube out, which we thought was really soon based on what they said. Took the tube out. Chase started to talk immediately to people around him and to us.
Wow.
He just was doing so well that, from that day, I think that night, they said, "By the way, tomorrow we're going to send you to the step down unit," which was on the same floor. By the next morning, he was doing so well, they're like, "Hey, we're going to transfer you to a 4th floor, just a regular floor."
It wasn't long after that he was up on the roof playing basketball, right?
Almost a day and a half, almost 2 days later. He was up on the roof playing basketball because they wanted him to get up. Because again, when you're in a coma and you're having all of that, you're laying there.
Secondary burns inside of his body.
Yeah, inside and out.
And the power of God. And I'm sure it took a lot for the Lord was carrying you through that. And you're trying to be positive, try to keep your faith, try to keep. And could you share a little bit about how you said you felt the prayers, but how the Lord was working, keeping? I mean, you weren't sleeping.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's such a stress on a couple to see your child like that. And we've talked several times that we never felt closer to God than at that time. And it was the prayers.
100%. I think that's on the darkest nights, right? When no one else was around and it was 2 a.m. and the machines are keeping him alive and the nurse is there and we're checking Facebook and we read the love and the prayers and the thoughts from so many people in Northeast Arkansas. I mean, so many people that I didn't. And actually, they were shared around the United States.
We really didn't know.
I mean, he got cards from a teacher in her class in South Dakota and Wyoming and places we never even heard of, and people were sending us things. And of course, my parents were down and Jen's parents were down from Iowa, and we only lived here about a year and a half. Yeah, about a year and a half. We had moved to Pocahontas and just felt, and again, that's what kept us going, because every person doubts, right? And you try not to doubt. And so, I think, it was hard not to lose faith, because they kept telling you the negatives all the time, right? They told us he'd never remember and he didn't know what was going on. And day 6, he kind of came out of it, and he obviously couldn't talk. And so he asked for a pen, right? And the nurse said, that can't happen. He's not doing that. And I said, how do you feel, buddy? And I still have the pad. I still have a photo of it. And I said, how do you feel? And he wrote nervous, that he was nervous, that he was scared. And, again, we just told him that we were there, that everyone was praying for him, that God was there, that, and of course they gave him more medicine to put him under.
Right.
Because he's not supposed to come out.
And you're not supposed to do that.
Right. Not supposed to come out. And so they're like,
the miracle's not supposed to happen either.
We're not supposed to be doing that. But, and I Father Mark witnessing that too.
Yeah.
I could everyone that day was in just such amazement.
I'm sure y'all were the talk of the hospital.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, well, that's when
I
believe they were bringing the other doctors in to see this.
Absolutely.
Because it's like everyone's going to verify that. Am I actually seeing this?
Right. Because again,
I remember hearing about that doctor saying there's no way.
Right.
This is medically.
No, it's not. And they said that, listen, no case ever recorded of Stephen Johnson's ever turned the page like Chase did. He was supposed to pass that day. He really was.
Love came walking in.
For sure.
The Lord
had different plans.
Yeah.
And still does for Chase.
For sure. Yeah, he relapsed the next 6 years in the fall. He would have another relapse. And he's prone to that the rest of his life. It obviously did some really major damage to his lung, his left lung at one point. Although again, God at work and the body healing. Now he's not totally healed, and that lung is still. But they had talked to us about. Imagine being a parent and they're talking about your 14 or 15-year-old having a lung transplant.
Wow.
How do you even fathom that, right? And and yet now again, he's healthy. He understands some of the signs.
So does he have to watch exactly what he takes as far as medication?
He really
100%.
doesn't take anything. And his other relapses have been from viruses.
Right.
So let's skip forward, and something I'm sure you're very proud of Chase about was the Make-A-Wish when that happened. And viewers, I want you to take a look at this.
For 19-year-old Chase McDonnough, tennis has always been his lifeline.
When you play tennis, you can just think about anything, and then you're just having fun.
It carried him through grade school.
Well, it means a lot. Tennis got him through.
And the biggest challenge of his life. 5 years ago, the energetic teen went to the hospital with a fever, a mysterious illness moving so quickly, doctors needed to put him into a medically induced coma to save his life. Only then was he diagnosed with Stephen Johnson's syndrome, a rare and potentially fatal autoimmune disorder, one with no cure.
They tell you that the mortality rate is really high. There's a really good likelihood that he's not going to make it.
But Chase rallied, thriving despite multiple flare-ups. Then 2 years ago, he was contacted by the Make-A-Wish Foundation, the organization that makes the dreams of terminally and critically ill children become reality. But instead of doing something for himself, Chase dreamed bigger.
When I got a wish, this just seemed like the thing to use it on.
I feel like everyone has just been so amazed by it.
It was here where Chase's dream began to come to life. It took 1.5 years of tireless volunteer work, all of it building up to this day. 4 brand new professional grade tennis courts anyone in town can use. We were with Chase when he saw it for the first time.
Hey, that's super cool.
The entire town came out for its opening day. Hundreds of people here to celebrate Chase and his generosity.
Chase, you're an inspiration. You will always have an impact on Pocahontas.
Bounce, hit, hey!
Breathing new life into a sport that in many ways helped save his.
I hope that those that don't know him and come up and see the courts just know that he truly gave that from the heart. That's really the only legacy that we all want to live.
We come over to y'all's house that night, and Shay had her little sign.
Yes, I have
And
those
everybody-
pictures.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody had signed the big poster board, and she was like, "Mom, do you remember this?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm not that old, Shay."
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, when Chase got released, the outpouring we came back to Pocahontas with.
We were on Park Street, lined up on Park Street.
We had a police escort.
Yeah.
People were lined up on Park Street. People were all the way to the house.
Amazing.
It was really incredible.
So proud I bet you're really proud of Chase for not being for being selfless and not wanting to name the tennis courts and go get the tennis courts.
How do you feel about all that?
Refurbished.
He's such a.
He's a humble guy.
He's very humble. He's very to himself.
Obviously.
He's very quiet. He doesn't like a lot of attention. And I remember the first meeting that we had with Make-A-Wish and their Make-A-Wish team. And, they asked him a lot of questions. What have you wanted to do? And he said, I want to take a trip to Europe with my family. And, they were just in general. And then they said, okay, the reason why we're here, obviously, is we want to pick something. And he said, yeah, but I don't want anything for myself. I want to give back to the community because I don't know how to say thank you. And my family doesn't know how to say thank you.
All the prayers.
Right. And we did,
that's
he
what
didn't.
That's what he was trying to say.
He was trying to say that. He just said, the thoughts and prayers, and he knew what had happened, right? He heard it from us. He
was in a coma, but
he witnessed and he felt it. And he didn't know how to really express to the community
appreciation.
How much he appreciated
all the thoughts and prayers. And still, he still thinks about it. He still is amazed.
It was a life-changing event for the entire family.
Right.
He's a walking miracle.
For the community, because, when we were discussing, this season of miracles, and Angie was one of the first people I reached out to. I said, who can we bring on to tell, about miracles? And you told me the McDonough family. I was like, wow, that's right.
Absolutely. It is a walking miracle.
And I went back and it's not that hard to research it. Went back and researched it and remembered everything. And, just amazing.
Yeah.
And I just knew we had to have you guys on the show.
Oh, we appreciate it.
Share your witness and share what the Lord has done for you.
Ronnie Rose.
Ronnie's great.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I consider him almost like a second father. And he took me in when we came down here. And there was a really dark time where Chase wasn't doing well. And but my son Ty was having parents' night. You know how they do for basketball.
Yes.
And he knew we were down there.
Yeah.
And he had said, Dad, I know you guys are down there and I hate to be selfish. And I know Grandma and Grandpa are here, but can one of you come home? And I was conflicted. And so that 2-hour drive, I pulled out a card that Ronnie Rose had given me with his, from the church, with his number, with his personal number that said to call me anytime. And for 2-hour drive, that man talked me through some of my hardest times as a father, right? Because I was trying to be the rock, right? I was trying to be as strong as I could be for everyone, right? And trying to be positive. And he let me just be me, but walk me through, and we prayed together and we talked. And I got back to Pocahontas and told him I loved him and told him thank you. And of course, I went to Ty's thing that night and, felt good about it, and then headed obviously right back to the hospital. But, and it's just him. And I have so many stories of so many people from St. Paul's, from this community, from everyone that just reached out. And they didn't have to, and again, they didn't know us. We didn't grow up here like everybody else, right? We weren't. We see how tight everyone is in Pocahontas, and everyone knows everyone. And we were new to the community, and yet we felt all the love and prayers, and
love came walking in, like I said.
But that's what led to that miracle. I truly believe that.
I think you're absolutely right.
It was the faith of everyone, right? And it was even the faith of Dr. Jake, who didn't believe.
He didn't believe, but he does now.
That part's amazing in itself.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I think also I'm remembering back to, I had people message me who I didn't know, but they said following Chase's story restored their faith.
Wow.
Right.
That really touched me too.
Right. I'm just almost speechless. I mean, the love of God. To God be the glory.
Absolutely.
The great things He hath done.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just an amazing story, and I'm just Angie, I'm speechless. You may have to finish.
I can't keep the.
You may have to finish. You may have to finish the show.
I'm trying not to look at you.
You know, I may not. You know, it's so God carried you through it, and
what a story He's got to tell His kids.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
And we appreciate you,
Yes.
you know, having us on, and hopefully someone will see this and again be touched by it, because that's the biggest thing. That's
Miracles.
Chase's message to everyone still.
Yeah, he's in college, and we've had him on as well, and I knew he was.
Absolutely. You couldn't have got 2 words out
I
of
would
him.
say he's a man of few words, for sure.
Well, sometimes those are the people that have the most to say.
You're right, they do.
Deepest words.
Because when he does talk, and when he does say thank you like that, it comes from a special place.
Right,
for
right,
sure.
right. Well, we're so grateful you came on tonight.
Absolutely.
So
Thank you
grateful
so
for sharing your
much.
story. And I
Thank
knew
you
that
for
was,
having us.
we're just thrilled. I know God's still working, and God's got great plans for Chase.
He sure does.
He's got great plans for all of us, and we hope that our viewers really enjoyed tonight's shot. Angie, I can't really sign us off. You're going to have to sign us off. It's just such a story, a wonderful story that God is alive, and never doubt that He loves us. He wants a personal relationship with us, and He died on the cross for us. And miracles do happen. Miracles do happen.
Absolutely.
And you know, we've got one more episode following this episode, be the June episode, and Father's going to really be having a lot of that. He's going to be discussing some of the Eucharistic miracles that have happened with the Eucharist. And
Father would have been here tonight, but he had a previous meeting. So
he's going to watch. He's going to watch the show, and then we're going to do on our sister show, Unity News After Hours. He's going to comment on this, and but I tell you, this has just been a powerful show, and I don't get speechless very often, Angie.
I never get speechless. I know that.
But you've done it. You've done just such a great witness. Such a great witness.
Yes.
But anyway, I want to go ahead and tell our viewers, join us for our June episode that will be airing in June. And again, thanks for coming out tonight. And God bless you both. God bless you both. And God bless our viewers. And tune in June. Until then, we'll see you. God bless and good night.
God bless.